Behind the scenes of people in AI. Okay.
You know, we announced on the 3rd of March that we were opening Zurich office publicly. We got great interest straight away. We got, 80 plus applicants within a day. Last time I checked, we had 400 plus applicants for our 2 open job listings, which was very good. But that's the problem. Like imagine, because there are other candidates, right? Everyone's in this situation, right, where there's like so many cool, highly qualified, experienced candidates applying for these jobs. And imagine the reason you lost it is something like this, right? That like you lost it because you were...
No, that's crazy.
Coming from Google, Exa felt like moving a few years into the future in terms of AI usage. In Google, we were using kind of like an IDE integrated LLM that would like generate some parts of files and not do an amazing job of like navigating between files or accomplishing complicated multi-part tasks, whereas at Exa we use these kind of modern coding agents. And one evening, one friend, he brought me to this tower, this startup tower called Frontier Tower. Each floor dedicated to different types of startups, right? So there's like a biotech floor and a like longevity floor and a tech floor and Web3 floor or a crypto floor. But what was more interesting was while we were downstairs checking in on the like computer terminal, the iPad that was the reception. So tell us more about your paper, Boris. Tell us more about what you were actually working on and what you presented at there.
I have to say, we had kind of large crowds around our poster. Oh, it always like comes in waves, right? We had like 2 or 3 peaks where me and my main first co-author and like one of our other co-authors, or the 3 of us at the same time were talking to 3 parallel crowds, and like it was hard to like maintain the volume to reach everyone. That was a really, really cool experience. Have this kind of crowds. And for the people that want to know what the secret is, it's twofold. What is it like to open and lead an office in Zurich for an exciting AI startup from San Francisco? What is it like to travel to and work in San Francisco? What is it like to go to one of the top 3 AI conferences in Rio, Brazil? How can you casually work on a side project and have an impact far greater than your initial playground suggested? Max and I have been working hard, but also having some fun working on AI and traveling around. In this episode, we wanted to discuss all the behind-the-scenes work that goes into leading an office for an exciting AI startup that wants to reimagine search itself and doing research at, if I may say so myself, one of the coolest bio-AI startups in town. We share our experience working at SF-based startups, what it's like to attend one of the big AI conferences, and tips and tricks for standing out at this conference and making the most out of it, as well as how to stand out amidst hundreds of applicants in a positive way. In this episode, I hope you can get some insights into the behind the scenes of working at the forefront of AI. Enjoy. So, we're back. We've been doing a lot of crazy stuff, both in the startup ecosystem now, and been traveling around, been working hard at the job, on side projects, many fun things. So I think it's really cool to just talk about behind the scenes of people working in AI and working at the frontier. You recently went to San Francisco. I think that's a cool point to start. What was your experience there?
Yeah, so I went to San Francisco at the very beginning of March as I joined Exa for the first 2 weeks of the month. And this is not my first time in San Francisco. I've been maybe a dozen times over 10 plus years. But it was actually the most time I've ever spent in the city of San Francisco, because typically I fly to San Francisco and then travel to Silicon Valley and spend the weekdays at least in and around Mountain View, and then go to the city of San Francisco for the weekends. But for this particular trip, I was in the city for the whole 2 weeks. So I got a much more realistic understanding of kind of what it's like to spend time downtown all the time. I saw different parts of the city. I took in some of the cultural things you should definitely do if you're in San Francisco. So if you haven't heard of a movie called The Room, it's famously one of the best worst films of all time, or the worst best films of all time, depending on which list you look for. But it's shot in San Francisco, and there's a cinema in San Francisco that plays it every month at some like nighttime showing. So I went to see it. It was amazing, as good as the worst movie of all time can be, but really a good experience. But I also did some of the things you're supposed to do, like do a run over the Golden Gate Bridge, and back. But I guess what was more interesting to our listeners is just sort of seeing more closely how the San Francisco startup ecosystem works. Beyond joining EXA and working in a YC startup, I was going for dinner with different friends on different evenings and going to different other venues. And everywhere I went was kind of buzzing with startups and startup energy. So, for example, whenever I would go for dinner with people, even if they were former colleagues from Google or whatever, they would all be like angel investors in different startups. They would all be advising different startups. They were always trying to like help their friends' startups network and connect, and which I thought was really interesting and something I don't see at all here in Zurich. But also there were like these networking events at the weekend that I got invited to by people, that were being hosted by particular startups, and that when you went to these events, like everyone there was in tech, everyone there was in different fancy startups, which was again cool and kind of different to what you see at events in Zurich. And I even got kind of a bit bitten by the bug of this angel investing, advising startups thing, and I met one friend of mine who's got a startup, and so I was like, can I become an angel investor advisor to your startup? And he was like, I would love that. And I was like, here's some money, sir. And he's like, thank you. And now I'm an advisor to his startup, which is amazing. And that startup's called Wafer, and that guy is called Emilio, and we should definitely have him on a future episode. They're doing really interesting work around optimizing LLM inference. So basically like using LLM agents to write really efficient CUDA kernels and not just CUDA, but GPU kernels in general, which is interesting because it's like literally an area I've been playing a lot in myself. And so we actually met each other through our mutual love of inference optimization. So it's cool that we can formalize it a bit more. Yeah. How was your experience, Boris? This was your first time here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is really cool. Like just getting into the vibe of San Francisco. You mentioned that it's very different to Zurich. I grew up in Berlin, where Berlin is also like famous for startups. But I mean, I wasn't too big into the startup scene there, but it definitely going to the Bay Area is almost entering a new world. Also, again, me coming from Tokyo, which is also like kind of it's modern, right? But also not. But literally arriving in San Francisco at SFO, driving to a hotel or Airbnb rather, every billboard is AI. You have OpenAI, you have Cursor, you have Nebius, you have everything is AI, which is insane. And a very fun story is that literally the day I arrived, I wanted to see some family friends, Bulgarian family friends actually, because during the week I would not have time. And we met up for like a Easter lunch, because that was like Easter Sunday, Bulgarian Easter Sunday. And everyone, like it was a whole Bulgarian community there, and everyone was in tech. Thinking about talking to your family friends that are like 50 plus years old and just everyone's in tech, it's insane to me. All the young people there, the kids that were also there, well, kids, the young people there, 20 plus years old, everyone was in tech. This guy was in Lyft, this guy working at a startup, this guy is talking about, I recently met this VC, and it's like, what? Like literally what you were just saying. Everyone's just VCs and startups and everything. I went to dinner to my family friend's place to have dinner with them, and I was talking with them about tech. This guy who is like 50 plus years old or whatever is telling me how he's using Cloud Code at his company. I'm like, what's happening here? My family friends circles, nobody's in tech. Nobody knows what Cloud Code is. And there, everyone knows it. It's so different. It was really, really crazy to me. It was really cool. I really, really felt the energy. It was basically impossible not to feel the energy. But yeah, that was just the very first experience. You get there and you instantly get hit by AI, startups, VCs, everything.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that as well, that the billboards and even just the public advertising is like so, it's unlike anything I've seen anywhere else in the world, right? Because it's so kind of niche and specific. Like, you know, you see like a billboard that just says like optimize inference for Grace Blackwell 200, and you're just like, this ad is just being shown to everyone in the city. Like, this is just like general purpose. Like, you know, in Zurich there'd be an ad that would just say Hugo Boss, you know. But here it's like ridiculous, or like BMW, whereas there it's like super niche, you know. It's like,
I mean, everyone's in tech there. Everyone's in tech. So yeah, this was my first week there. I got to visit my office, the headquarters of my amazing startup. And yeah, I mean, I went there to work, right? I had my Airbnb and all I did was, you know, work, but I also tried to get like some of the American spirit, just go like out for one evening and did some top golf. That was fun. But yeah, the energy at the office was amazing, right? Everyone was working hard, everyone was excited. Which again, like working at like other more traditional places in Germany, for example, you definitely don't have that. I was very sad about that, right? Because people are good, but you know, they do their job and then go home after their shift, and that's it, right? Which is also completely fine. But there, everyone is excited and wants to get shit done. It's crazy.
yeah, what was one sort of anecdote, funny story that I had, which I think really kind of summarizes the place, right, is that everyone I met was somehow like involved in the sort of startup ecosystem. And one evening, one friend, he brought me to this tower, this startup tower called Frontier Tower. And Frontier Tower is like I don't know, many floors, you know, maybe 12 plus floors. Each floor dedicated to different types of startups, right? So there's like a biotech floor and a like longevity floor and a tech floor and I don't know, Web3 floor or a crypto floor. And like, you know, on those floors, there's just lots of like small startups building their things. And, you know, my friend had a startup there. That's why he was bringing us there. But what was more interesting was while we were downstairs checking in on the like computer terminal, the iPad that was the reception, the security guard started chatting to some random guy, and the security guard in the Frontier Tower was talking about how he has his own longevity startup. So even the security guard in the tower is making a startup, you know. And this is
crazy.
I mean, even not on this trip, but on previous trips, I've also had the experience where like almost every Uber driver I've had also has a startup or startups, you know, and they're also Uber driving, but also often like working a full-time job at Amazon, but also often like building like a healthcare startup or something. And you're kind of like, that's an insane level of industriousness.
I mean, that maybe also speaks to the fact how hard it is to live there, maybe, right? Because it's very expensive to live there. That was also like a culture shock, especially coming from Japan, where the food is amazing and very affordable. You can easily get like a very nice lunch for, let's just say, $5 to $10. Very good lunch. And then you go to SF, and you can be happy if you get like a bowl of pasta for $20. For $30. It's very different. But honestly, Zurich is not different. Zurich is exactly the same price range. So for you, it's nothing different.
Yeah, that's true. The pricing is not shocking if it comes to Zurich. And then like, could you see yourself living there? Could you see yourself moving there in the future?
I would do it for the job, but ideally I would not want to do it. Like if I have another option that's like at least as good, I would choose not to be in SF. That said, being in SF just opens up so many doors. It makes life so much easier for you if you want to work in tech and want to work at these startups or companies, because you just go to one party and you meet like people from like 10 different startups, as you mentioned, and then you're like, hey, I mean, I'm looking for a new job. And like, oh, okay, you can come work at our startup. I'm like, okay, done, right? Whereas, and I mean, in Tokyo, it's way more difficult. But even in Zurich, it's it's also not like that, right? I mean, as far as I can tell. So I would do it, but I would prefer not to. I like my Tokyo, and I do like Zurich. So those are two very, very nice options.
I could definitely see myself moving there. I definitely see myself trying the US in a few years. And I mean, SF obviously has a certain gravity. I mean, this one thing I find, and this is probably true of American cities in general, but they're often very different by neighborhood, much more so than European cities. I feel like European cities are much more consistent by neighborhood. But like, so if you're in like the downtown, for example, with in SF, like there's a lot of homeless people, a lot of drug addiction and whatever else, and then you can sort of magically go a few kilometers, west, south, east, north, any direction really, and then that problem just disappears. It seems to be like some of these things are just like localized to like a few square kilometers, right? And so there are like really nice neighborhoods where you're like, oh, this is so nice and clean and safe, and then you go to somewhere like downtown and you're like, oh wow. Whereas in Europe, these would be two different cities in two different countries,
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, no, for me, SF was a really cool experience. But I went there, spent a week there, and after spending a week there, I took off to go to Rio. In Rio, there was the iClear conference, and that was it was my first time at one of the big three or big two or big three, NeurIPS, iClear, and I would say ICML. And that was also a really cool experience. A lot of fun things, just in Rio itself, but also just conference experience that we can get into.
And for me, I went from SF after 2 weeks. I went back to Zurich to open the Zurich EXA physical office. So that's been a absolute roller coaster.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes of people in AI. Okay. Okay, Max, let's start with EXA. What's going on in Zurich?
I guess, I mean, this isn't just the Zurich piece, but I suppose including even the sort of SF piece, right? So I joined EXA at the 2nd of March. We announced on the 3rd of March that we were opening the Zurich office publicly. We also put live some job listings, and we got great interest straight away. We got, 80 plus applicants within a day. Last time I checked, we had 400 plus applicants for our 2 open job listings, which was very good. We've also got a lot of like nice media coverage, news coverage, which is awesome. And actually a funny story for the benefits of AI, which I can get into. And then of course, after the sort of 2 weeks in SF, me and my colleague Felix came back and physically opened the office space, started outfitting it with, monitors, getting things set up, and actually started working. We've also been sort of hiring the team so that we now actually have 4 full-time employees in Zurich, and we have a 5th guy who's already signed, who will join on July 1st. So that's amazing. Quick growth. The company itself is growing really fast as well, and it's great. It's doing amazing. Probably of most interest to our listeners, or like one of some of the more interesting observations myself, is how much AI is used at EXA, or I guess I think it's pretty in general in some of these startups. Like coming from Google, EXA felt like moving a few years into the future in terms of AI usage. Like in Google, we were using kind of like an IDE integrated LLM that would like generate some parts of files and not do an amazing job of like navigating between files or like accomplishing complicated multi-part tasks. Whereas, at EXA, we use these kind of modern coding agents, these like Claude Code type things, Codex and Devon and these other things. And, these are much more empowered, much more agentic than, this kind of like single file or even like IDE based ones where they're kind of more limited. And so it's quite different. Like we're definitely we're leaning a lot more into the kind of vibe coding aesthetic. which again, very interesting, but also sort of seeing kind of the challenges that brings. Obviously, like the bottleneck moves, right? Like writing code becomes cheap, but code review is still expensive, which is obviously something I also see on my side projects with open source. But yeah, it's so far like, you know, amazing company, amazing people, really good energy, really excited, energetic, motivated, driven, very AI centric, very, you know, very empowered. Like that's probably the biggest difference, right? Like there's not like bureaucracy or rules to kind of wade through, or like trying to find the right person to approve something. It's like, just do stuff, which is very much aligned with my aesthetic.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, at our company, everyone is just using any of the coding agents, like specifically, I think Cloud Code or Codex or whatever, right? Whatever doesn't have the usage limits reached. But yeah, it's a completely different game. Like certain features are just very quick fixes, right? Like 200 lines of code changed. But some features are like 7,000 lines changed or 5,000 lines changed. And for those, it's just very different kinds of approaches that you're working with, right? I personally really prefer to like spend many hours on like the planning document and be very, very, very rigorous and about that. And then my coding agent almost one-shots it after, like when I said, okay, now you're loose. And then it's on me to like really rigorously test, are the edge cases the same? Is there parity to what was previously already supported? And yeah, the review process still takes a while and needs to be very rigorous. Because you can't read every line of these 7,000 lines, right? If you manually write them, you know what the code is, right? But it also takes you like 10 times the time. So here, if you want to go for speed, you can't read every single line. So you have to really, really hone in your review and like quality control, basically, right? So that's also how we work here. Very agent centric, and it's so far it works, right? I mean, again, like you have to roll back sometimes and like fix stuff, but net, I think it's definitely insane. It's insane.
No, I mean, to be honest, I'm amazed at the throughput, and I'm also amazed at the like relative lack of issues in terms of like outages or serious ones. And I mean, of course, some of this is like the LLM generates the code, a different LLM jumps in and reviews the code. So you might get Codex auto-reviewing the Claude code. Maybe they have a little discussion between themselves, you know, they come to the conclusion, you know, a human eyeballs it and says, remove this verbose comment, remove this nonsense. And, you know, you get something a bit more streamlined, and then you submit it and no outages. Great success. Actually, what was almost a funnier, more interesting kind of anecdote I could share here is, so I mentioned that we've hired a few people, that we have a lot of people in the pipeline. So I've been doing a lot of interviews. One day I had 6. But what's really surprised me, well, 2 things. One thing is, once you're kind of hiring a lot of people, you start getting a lot of recruiters directly sending you these like, I don't know, like they do sort of headhunting type things. And it's kind of very annoying, to be honest. Like they'll send you like an anonymized CV for some candidate that they have, and they're just trying to chase you with it. And I'm kind of like, we have hundreds of really good candidates in the pipeline. Like I don't need your like anonymized CV. Like, why are you bothering me with this?
Interesting. I haven't heard that one. Yeah.
And it's funny because I've seen it on websites in the past where it says like, we do not deal with like intermediate agencies, like do not, you know, like, and I saw that, but I never thought about it. I never had actually been on the other side of it. I never got these like cold emails from some recruiter telling me like, hey, I have this like really strong candidate from DeepMind in Zurich. And I'm kind of like, I probably know him. Like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense, but whatever. But what was really interesting to me is like a few candidates have really smelled. And now, I mean like bad body odor, stink. And it's funny because I can't think of the last time I've dealt with someone who smelled in a professional capacity. Now, obviously, if you go to like the train station and there's a homeless guy, you pass him, he's going to smell. But I'm talking about like a relatively like well-dressed 20 to 30-year-old in an office coming over to you and stinking of sweat. And in some cases, these people were like 20-somethings, you know, but very, very strong candidates, like, you know, publications at top conferences, you know, solid academic backgrounds. In one case, one of these candidates was like even like 10 plus years experience, principal engineer or something, you know, like, again, very strong candidates. But in both cases, stinking of sweat. And even if you were too lazy to shower, why would you do that on the day of an interview? Like, there's a few days in your life that you should definitely shower, you know, before a date, before an interview, maybe before you try and get a big loan off the bank, you know. It just makes sense. Because, like, obviously this is not something that speaks to their ability to do their job, but it does set you up in a negative light. Like, it does make things harder for you. Like, people are going to be negatively predisposed to you if you just come in smelling, you know. And I don't say this to be judgmental. I say this because clearly some people don't realize that, like, something so trivial could be actually providing value. Like, imagine you're good enough to like write top papers and put them in top conferences, but you don't get jobs because you didn't bother to shower the morning of the interview. And no one ever told you. Like, I think that's crazy, right? Am I crazy? Is that not reasonable, Boris?
I mean, if they're really strong, you know, you gotta take what you gotta take. But no, I think it's not professional. It's not. I think it's not professional.
I mean, the flip side of this coin that I also saw in the last 2 months of interviewing is people being late for an interview. And again, it's even if you're the kind of person who's like tardy and late and doesn't pay attention, there are a few instances where you should pay a little more attention. You know, even if you intend on being late every day for work for the rest of your career, you should probably be there on time for the interview, you know?
No, I mean, maybe it's my German-ness. Like, don't be late. Just
don't be late. And make sure, maybe if you're late, you should be late because you were having a shower, you see? Life hack.
No, that's also not acceptable. Wait, what's better? Not have a shower and be on time, or take a shower and be late?
I mean, yeah, it's a hard trade-off, you know? I mean, I found these things fascinating because, again, like, I mean, obviously people are late sometimes, right? Sometimes, you know, your train is cancelled or whatever. But like, for me, at least, if I'm going for an interview, I usually don't aim to like be like super tight with my timing. I'll like try to be there a bit, especially for a job that I care about, right? It's something that is an interesting opportunity. You know, if I have to be somewhere and I don't know where it is, you know, I'll be there half an hour early and just be kind of hovering around awkwardly, you know, so that I don't be late. But again, seemingly this is a rare way of looking at the world.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you have other candidates.
I mean, but that's the problem. Like imagine, I mean, because, you know, there are other candidates, right? Everyone's in this situation, right, where there's like so many cool, highly qualified, experienced candidates applying for these jobs. And imagine the reason you lost it is something like this, right? That like you lost it because you were 10 minutes late, you know, or you lost it because, you know, you forgot to shower that day. And I mean, the problem is, it's not just that you forgot to shower that day. You probably forgot to shower in general or something, and it just so happened to be that day, you know, like,
Yeah. Well, I also got to meet a lot of I mean, especially in tech, there are a lot of interesting people, you know, that are very, very good at what they're doing. But everyone has their different personality traits. I mean, when I was at iClear, I got to meet a lot of interesting people. Or at least people watch, right? There's so many different kinds of people. It's really fascinating, and so many just insanely smart people. It's so interesting to talk with every one of them. So yeah, I mean, but what I have to say is that this year at iClear, I mean, I've been, this is not my first conference, but it's my first one of the big ones, the big general AI conferences. I've been to like a computer vision conference, right? Everything was about computer vision. It was very themed. It was great. But here at iClear, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I also like I've had friends that say the same. It feels a bit too general. Like I walked, there was like so many papers. Like I think this year was like 5,000 papers, I think, that were accepted. And on each day you had 1,000 papers, or at each of the poster sessions, you had like 1,000 papers per day on the 3 poster session days that you were supposed to like walk past and then like maybe peek at the title and decide, is this interesting or not? Or you just use the app to look at all the papers and then just scroll through it because it's just way faster. I couldn't be bothered with like scrolling through everything. It's impossible, right? So, and since it's so insanely general, like you have to know exactly know exactly what you're looking for. And then I knew roughly what I was looking for, because now I'm working at AI for science, AI for biology startup, right? So I want to dig deeper into like these kind of papers and look for papers that might be relevant for us. And then I found like maybe 3 posters, because I just couldn't scroll through all of them to really look at every single title. So like, okay, well, either the papers that I care about are in the first 300 that I can scroll through and look at, or not, and then bad luck. So I found 3, but 2 of them just weren't there. Like they had the boards empty. One of them was there, and the guy was there too, so I could talk to the author, and that was great. It was really, really good. Got to ask a lot of questions. He answered everything. It was phenomenal. But in general, the poster session it felt very empty. Like I'm over exaggerating here, but it felt like 50% of the posters were either just not there, or the posters were there, but there was no one there to present them. So then the question here is, why? Is it maybe because just Rio as the target city for a conference is just a bit dangerous, and people might just be worried of going there? I mean, again, like we can also talk about Rio the city, but it definitely is a bit more dangerous, at least coming from like a place like Tokyo where everything is insanely safe and the contrast is just very stark. But also coming from San Francisco, which is also not like the safest place to be, depending on where you are, right? Like my friends told me that I shouldn't leave my car, my backpack in the car when going grocery shopping, for example. That for me was crazy, right? What? I can't leave my backpack in the car? What? And Rio was like even like a step up, right? So even for people living in SF or in California, like Rio might be considered a bit more dangerous. So that might be a reason. Another reason might just be that Rio is really far away from many of like the main places where AI researchers are. Like literally going from San Francisco to Rio took me 20 hours, right? So it's even that's like far away. And then New York or Europe or Asia, it's a bit further away, right? So maybe that's a reason. Maybe it's the political climate in the US that all the foreign students that have like a visa to study in America, that they just don't want to leave US because they might not get back in. I don't know, but it felt empty.
But so when I go to these conferences, like there's obviously a whole range of different things going on, right? The poster sessions being one of them. But to be honest, I don't get that much out of the poster sessions. You know, like obviously you can walk around, you can spot some interesting stuff, you can talk to the author for a bit. Even though years later, maybe months later, I'll probably find some of these papers on archive and read them more detailed, and like for me, I find like things like the workshops usually super valuable because they're like organized and kind of concentrated, or tutorials. If there are tutorials, like I sit through like a half day on some sub area and I learn just a whole bunch. Or again, sometimes these tutorials or workshops or talks or whatever are almost like people just presenting on stage, like a handful of selected papers. So were they there? Did you enjoy those?
Yeah, absolutely. So my post session experience in general was just go to the posters of the people that I know just to, support them and hang out with them. Like just meet up with all my researcher friends, be it like ex-Sakana colleagues or just interns or like people from all around the world. That's just always just a lot of fun, catching up with people. But yeah, beyond that, post-session was meh. But yeah, workshops were really good. I mean, one of the workshop days, you might skip one of the days and do like some touristy stuff while you're in the country, right? That's quite common. But one of the last workshop day was phenomenal. Was phenomenal, but also like one bad thing is that there were three bio AI workshops at the same time in different rooms, which is like that's just not the best thing to do, I guess, because I then had to just jump back and forth between like the rooms to get like the sessions that I really cared about. But those were really good. As you mentioned, they are very dense. They're organized. I love the panel discussions because, going really deep into papers, if I really want to have a deep dive into a paper, I'll read the paper. But especially nowadays with like coding being much easier and like literally doing a deep research to get like a high, like deep research works really well for like a literature review, right? So all of these tools make it way easier to do like research on your own. So in my opinion, what becomes much more valuable is having a good research taste and asking really good questions and like knowing where the field is going and what's necessary to work on. And that's where I really like the panel discussions in these workshops, or maybe even the keynote speeches that are in the first few days, right? Because those also point out specific papers, but also just give these high level discussions and overviews and what's important, what's not important, what's promising, what's the limitations, and there you pick up like way more on what you might want to work on. And then if you have this clear idea or this North Star, then you can really dive deep into the papers and like really read them if you want to. And those I really enjoyed.
For me, I would go as far as saying that like for the conferences that I've attended, the workshops and tutorials are the things that I find the most like educationally valuable in terms of like, the most like concretized like learning that I do, because again, they're structured, right? They're usually like a kind of dense block of like, here's like a half day about like building LLMs from scratch, or here's a half day about like everything you need to know about model merging, and like it's just very kind of dense and structured. And so I find like oftentimes I just go to kind of like random ones. Sometimes there's like a few on that I like the look of, a bit like what you described, but I don't actually have the effort, energy to like jump between three rooms. So I just go to one room and just do all of that one. Bit lucky dip. But again, I often have this thing where I end up learning things I wouldn't have otherwise. Like again, I'm sitting through like vision language models for some reason, and I'm like, learning a lot of really interesting anecdotes there and research kind of tricks and tips. I'm like, very good. And this often comes back to me in a kind of very useful, valuable way, right? Because, some model merging paper shows up and I'm like, it's a good thing I sat through that model merging workshop or that VLM workshop.
Yes, serendipitous discovery of insights that you can later at some point use as a stepping stone for something that you would have otherwise not thought of. It's really cool to look outside of your niche to really get like some of these ideas. And
the other one that I want to ask about was like the kind of socialization, like, because the thing that I would say beyond the machine learning knowledge is like the networking and making friends and whatever. And that's something that I found like really on another level when you go to the top conferences, right? Is that like when I was at NeurIPS last December, they took over the city of San Diego for the like 6 days it was on, right? So if you went out downtown near the convention center, every bar, every nightclub had, if not the whole bar, a huge section of the bar cornered off for like a NeurIPS after party. On some nights we were going from one after party to another after party to another after party. And like each of them is like being sponsored by different companies, so they're all free, which is even more hilarious. And you're just going to them and just like meeting maybe people at that company, maybe just random other researchers, and you're just making friends and you're aggressively like networking, and it's fantastic, and it's it's free. I mean, it's part of the experience. But how is it there in Eichler?
So first of all, everyone that listening either knows it already or has to know that Max is probably one of the most insane networkers that I know. Like, he can just talk to anyone and build a network like with in the blink of an eye. I struggle more with talking to people or initializing or initiating a discussion. You know, once I get rolling, I can talk, but yeah, I do have to say that I also went to some after parties, and that was great. Got to meet some interesting people. Now, I do have to say some of the connections. I mean, you just talk, you get along, and you connect on LinkedIn, and in most cases, that's where it stops, right? I mean, you don't have to be best friends with everyone. You don't have to collaborate with everyone you meet. So that's completely fine, right? But what helped me is that I was there with two friends of mine who themselves knew people, and through them I could meet those other people in person and connect with them, but more on a more deep level. Like, literally also going with one of them, we also then went to see the big Jesus, the Redeemer in Rio, right? So like that felt like way more deep, right? And if I go to SF, this guy works at Waymo. So if I go to SF, I would be very happy to just hook him up again and, you know, just see him, because we went on like the touristy stuff together. But I also got to meet some people that work in the bio AI space, that were, for example, that recognize the company that I'm at, and like, oh, I know this guy working at your company, or I know the CEO. He was at my lab and stuff like that. So I also got these random connections all of a sudden, which felt really cool. And also, when I went up to some of these bio people at the workshops and just talked about them, they, for example, might recognize the company. I'm like, oh, you're working at the company. Oh, that's really nice. Finally seeing someone here of the company here at the workshop. How's XYZ doing? And that felt like an instant unlock as well. Just having the name tag basically with the company, you know, within the niche of bio AI. So that one also really helped.
There's definitely that kind of like bimodal networking that you described, right? There's a lot of this like extremely superficial, like you talk for a few minutes, you connect on LinkedIn, and probably you never speak ever again, you know, almost certainly. And then there's obviously the other extreme where you actually spend some time, you know, with someone and, you know, build some proper connection where you actually will see them again, or hopefully see them again. I find though there's a kind of funny, like, even though it's kind of bimodal in that sense, like you kind of probably leave your trip saying, well, that guy I'll see again, and this person I just connected with I never will. It's not very hard, actually, I think, in hindsight, to flip some of these people into the kind of like middle, to a sort of a middle category that you didn't think of. Like, my experience actually is that, like, with some of these things, you know, you meet these people kind of transiently. But if you do end up in like their city, right? Because you know, often they've traveled to Rio, they're not from Rio. You know, if you end up in the city they're in and you look at your LinkedIn and you know some people in Dubai or, you know, New York or San Francisco or wherever it is that you happen to be, and you message them, my experience is they're actually often fairly open to meeting you and having a chat and whatever. Like, it's pretty easy to flip some of these people out of this, like, I don't know, just random additional contact on LinkedIn to someone that you've actually made some more meaningful connection with, which I think is pretty cool, but underutilized.
No, for sure. I mean, yeah, underutilized is probably like the thing, right? I think if you are the guy that just takes initiative to follow up on these connections, I mean, then you will have much more success than just not doing anything, which is probably for most people like the default state, including me. But
in the last like 2 years I was at NeurIPS both years, and in both cases I've met a bunch of people who I've kind of kept on as sort of contacts, friends, And even on the more recent Neurops, again, like, you know, I did like a lot of these connections. I don't know, probably connected just randomly with like order of hundreds, maybe 1,000 people, you know, but I don't know the exact number, but, you know, and some of them I kind of felt like, okay, this is a bit transient. But then like when I'm in that city, you know, I do this regularly, like randomly travel around and just say, hey, who do I know in Lisbon? And then I see some guy from Hugging Face. I'm like, aha, hello. You know, or when I was in San Francisco in the beginning of March, we had a party, kind of work party at EXA, and they basically, you know, the CEO told me to invite some friends if I knew anyone else who was in SF and wanted to come. So I invited like some people I was good friends with, and some other people who I just kind of knew vaguely who live in San Francisco. And some of them came, and, you know, then we chatted for a while, and they kind of, you know, now we're more friendly, and they met a whole bunch of people, and it's just like, I don't know. There's actually, I feel like these like weak connections are often more interesting in the sense that, like, you know, if it's very tangential, then they're going to come and not know anyone, so they're going to get more networking juice from the squeeze.
I mean, yeah, I think also the cool thing about research, especially if you are a researcher in academia or a PhD student, which most people at NEURPS and like the companies are the conferences are PhD students, right? I don't know if people, please fact check that before you're taking my numbers here, but the point what I want to say is you can do collaborations, right? If you have shared interests and you show this interest at the poster session or just by random chatting, and you see that both people are aligned, it's completely reasonable to expect that you might just collaborate at some point, right? And I think that's like the cool thing about research and academia, where you can just do that. If you're at a company, you know, that's going to be a bit harder, right? To do this cross-institutional collaboration, and then sharing something in public as well. But even if you don't want to do that, you can also just work on fun side projects together, right? So that's really cool.
I mean, I also think that you also don't need to be so sort of short term oriented in your thinking, right? You can also just like, you know, you meet lots of people, and then at some point you're in their city, in and around, you invite them for some event, and they come or they don't come, and maybe it leads somewhere, maybe it doesn't. Actually, on a networking anecdote, the guy I talked about earlier, the started up by Angel Invested in, so this is called Wafer, formerly called Herdora. But the story of how I got to know the founder of that was I was posting on LinkedIn about GPU optimization of PyTorch a couple times over last summer, and so this guy who's also interested in space sees my posts, he connects with me. He then sends me a voice note, and it was probably the only voice note I ever received on LinkedIn. And I was like, that's weird. Who sends voice notes on LinkedIn? So then I listened to it, and, you know, it was him chatting a bit, and I like looked up where he was, and it said San Francisco. And I also happened to be in Silicon Valley at the time. So I said to him, do you want to go for beers on Friday? And he was like, I said, with me and some other Google and DeepMind people or whatever. And he was like, sounds amazing. And so he came, and we became friends.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff happens, yeah, but maybe it's just a me problem. It's just a me problem that I definitely I'm just way too bad at this kind of stuff. But yeah, but I do have to say very briefly, because you also mentioned people taking over the city. Every time I went for dinner with my friends, it was basically instantly clear who of the people at the restaurant were iClear people and who wasn't. that was very funny to see, especially in Rio, where, you know, it's Latin America, you know, people have energy and are outgoing, and then in the tech space, many are a bit shyer, again, including me. And it was like a very clear, the decision boundary would have been very easy to draw. So that was very fun. But yeah, anyway, but what I also can say is that I went to Rio because I presented my own paper. I had a poster session there. And that's where I also got to talk to a lot of people. some people in more depth because I was doing like one-on-one or one-on-two presentations, and like they would ask really deep questions and they would follow up a lot, and that was really cool. And those were really also fun. And for others, like it was just, we I have to say, we had kind of large crowds around our poster. Oh, it always like comes in waves, right? But I mean, we had multiple times, like we had like 2 or 3 peaks where me and my main first co-author and like one of our other co-authors, but the 3 of us at the same time were talking to 3 parallel crowds, and like it was hard. It was hard to like maintain the volume to reach everyone. So that was a really cool experience for me to have these kind of crowds. And for the people that want to know what the secret is, it's twofold. One, stickers. We made stickers. We did our marketing, right? We had some stickers for our little we had like little fish that represent the models that we use in our paper, and then we had stickers for these fish, and people just love stickers.
But also Sakana has like amazing graphic design, visual communication. They're like world class cuteness.
I mean, little fish. Although I have to say that I did me and my co-author, we did the poster just completely on our own, and did like the graphic design. All of that was just our own little craftsmanship. But yeah, it was great. And then we also had like little business cards. That was the idea of my co-author. He was very big on these business cards, like with the little QR codes. And again, I do not have it in me to just walk up to people and just grab them and pull them to the poster. But my co-author, he was like, this guy or girl looked at our poster for more than 2 seconds. Hey, do you want to listen to our elevator page? And they were like, yeah, sure. But it worked. And then they also stayed for the entire thing and asked questions. So it seemed like they got excited. But yeah, that was also like a really fun experience.
Nice. I mean, it's also good if you're in certain positions, people come speak to you and then you don't have to speak to them. Like you don't have to open them, right? Yeah. This is especially true if you happen to like give a big talk to a big hall of people. Like the second the talk is over, you'll have like a dozen or so people crowding around you being like, oh, that was interesting. How do you do this or that? And you're just like, so easy.
Yeah.
So tell us more about your paper, Boris. Tell us more about what you were actually working on and what you presented at iClear.
Okay. You know how everyone, like these big frontier labs, they just want to train one bigger and bigger model that just knows everything? I mean, that has its limitations. It's super expensive to train and to serve. And, the more you want to train it, the more you have risk of catastrophic forgetting. And, it's challenging. There are limitations. So if you take a step back and try to be nature inspired, right? If you look at what human civilization does, no single person knows everything. No single expert knows everything. But as a collective intelligence, right? People collaborate, and as a collective intelligence, we can solve all these complex challenges in the real world. So what we try to do is take this idea of collective intelligence, but also evolving this collective intelligence with capabilities that complement each other in an algorithm for AI. So what we developed is a method called ACDC. Assessment co-evolving with diverse capabilities. And it's a complicated name because we wanted to have a cool acronym. But basically what we do is we co-evolve a population of LLMs, of smaller LLMs, on the range of like 7B, 8B, but we also tried out 14B. We co-evolve this population of models alongside synthetic tasks. Synthetic tasks being just generated by some other LLM, for example. And these synthetic tasks are intentionally designed or evolved such that they are just very diverse. A lot of unique tasks that are very diverse and measure and assess very different capabilities. Our models then that we evolve are evolved such that they have very diverse capabilities. I.e., we have models that are very good at all tasks, but not at like many of the tasks. But we also keep models that might not have the highest overall fitness, but solve tasks uniquely, right? That other models don't solve. So on a population level, we just have a lot of diversity and a lot of coverage of all these diverse tasks. And when we do that for many generations, what we can show is that our evolved task force, right? If we then have like 80 models in the end and literally just select like 8 out of them with some methods, we can show that these 8 models have higher coverage than even GPT-4o, right? So that 8 7B models can solve all the problems that GPT-4o could solve. And if we then also have like a nice spider plot where we can show that our task force has like complementary skills. One model is very good at answering computer science questions, but not so good at law questions. And another model is good at law questions, but not so good at computer science questions. Whereas if we just resample the same baseline model, you know, it's resampling the same model and it has like these unique modes in certain subjects. And even if we then go from like taking 3 or 8 models, right, where at least one of them has to have the answer correct, that's the coverage question. And if we apply some best of n techniques, where we have the answers and then just try and pick out one correct one, because that's what some people usually care about, right? Having one answer, we can show that with only 3 14B models of our evolved population, that gets within like 3% of GPT-4o. And if we scale up to like 8 models to pick out one answer, we're like within 1% of GPT-4o on like many different benchmarks that we tested on average across all of these, right? And so we show that if we intentionally evolve this population to be very unique and diverse, they complement each other. They have complementary skills and can even challenge these huge frontier LLMs that are supposed to know everything in one single model.
And when you do the comparison here, you have 8 or so small models, and at least one of them has given you the correct answer.
That's
compared to one answer from GPT-4o or 8 answers from GPT-4o?
One answer of GPT-4o. So in total, we argue that we have like way fewer parameters actually being used like across these different models, right?
And so if you got 8 answers, how do you select the correct one?
So we tried out different techniques. So the cool thing is that this best of n stuff is orthogonal to our work. We're basically improving the upper bound, and then the orthogonal work here is to improve best of n techniques to actually close the gap to the upper bound, right? So we tried simple techniques like literally just having different LLM judge setups, but also there are like confidence measures where you assess the log prop of the sequence, or there are different mathematical tools that you can use to assess the confidence of a sequence that you can also use for ranking, or just using these reward models that just take in a sequence and assign a scalar reward. Interestingly enough, different techniques are better for different kinds of problems. For example, multiple choice or open-ended math or coding, right? So we tried all of this. But yeah, that's what we tried there.
And these the individual sort of specialized models, these are all effectively fine-tunes of the same base. And then from the fine-tunes, you derive task vectors, which you then use model merging to kind of mix them over generations. Is that correct?
Spot on, exactly. So we start with like 3 little models, like an instruct model, for example, a math model, and a code model, right, as from the same model family. And then we do our genetic algorithm to do the crossover, which leverages model merging. That's our crossover operation. And we then also have a mutation operation, which is effectively just noising the weights. Although we're not noising everything away just as in the weight space, but we're decomposing the weight matrices into their singular values and then noising them, just because that's just a nice, neat novelty that we introduce here.
It's cool seeing all these like ideas come together, you know, over the years.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like I mean, I'm a big fan of these evolutionary algorithms and genetic algorithms, and collective intelligence and stuff like that. I think it's exciting, right? So you can leverage these algorithms and techniques for actually evolving models and even optimizing weights for a specific model, right? Evolutionary strategies, for example, there are papers that show that you can use evolutionary strategies as a post-training method, which may or may not be better than GRPO. But you can also use these algorithms on a prompt, but basically on evolving LLM code solutions, right? For example, AlphaEvolve, the big algorithm from Google DeepMind or from Sakana Shinkai Evolve, that discovered these new algorithms for a more efficient matrix multiplication, for example, right? Those algorithms leverage an LLM as a mutation operator of mutating the code, the algorithm that the LLM generates to solve the problem. But this evolutionary algorithm under the hood leverages techniques like quality diversity, where you build up an archive and which branch do you continue to evolve and stuff like that. So yeah, it's fundamentally the same or very similar algorithms, but applied to different primitives or substrates.
Yeah. I would definitely recommend our listeners to check out like model merging if they're not familiar with it. I feel like it's really interesting and really useful. Like some of the like insights, the fact that that models trained from the same base end up in the same kind of basin, and how you can kind of taste the difference vector and kind of combine those to kind of combine capabilities or like even scale up or downscale some of these is super interesting and super useful, right? That oftentimes you can have like a new you can fiddle with your models and your data and then reuse these task vectors a bit later and get similar results to like a full fine-tune, but very cheaply, very quickly.
It's honestly also just from a research and like math perspective, it's black magic. Like it doesn't make any sense to literally just do a linear combination of the weights of two models where the weights themselves or the function that they are representing is definitely not linear. And then you just do a linear combination between it and it works. And you genuinely get novel capabilities.
But what's amazing as well is just the reliance on the shared basis, right? That you've like initialized like whatever llama somewhere, converged down to some point, and then your two fine tunes are like somewhere here, that like if you take like a totally different randomization of llama, they end up here and here, and then you can't merge them, it's
yeah. I mean, Sakana AI actually developed this evolutionary model merging, where before evolutionary model merging, you had like some model merging wizards that just manually tried out different weights for like take 60% of model A and 40% of model B, for example, right? You have to manually tune that, and Sakana AI developed this evolutionary model merging technique. And the example that they show there is you have a model that's very good at math and speaks English, but doesn't speak Japanese, so it can't do Japanese math. And then you have a model that can speak Japanese, but is very bad at math, so it sucks at Japanese math. And then you do evolutionary model merging of these two models, and the final model is good at Japanese math. Right? You're never doing backprop here, right? You're never actually just optimizing for Japanese. Well, you are optimizing for Japanese math, but there's no backprop there. You're just doing linear combinations of these two models, of the weights there. It's black magic. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's cool. It's very cool. Yeah.
Indeed.
Something I was playing with myself on side projects recently, model merging. Just check it out.
Yeah, I mean, you've been playing with, you've been doing a lot of side projects, right? And quite literally open source contributions that aren't just like some small vibe coded features that you push to overwhelm the open source maintainers. you actively push like things that influence the entire stack across many layers that many people can benefit from. So let's dive into that one.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know how I get started in some of these things. I just gotta get these ideas into my head. But I was kind of getting this, maybe it's because I was seeing these AI generated videos on YouTube, and I was kind of wanted to learn more about this AI video generation space. So I kind of looked into it and kind of quickly discovered a few kind of repos, or what did I say discovered? Claude told me about a few repos or a few potential papers to look into. So I did. One of them was a thing called Mimic Motion, which is for taking a photograph of someone and taking a reference video and then having the person from the photograph do the dance from the video. So I was looking at that. And another one that was recommended to me was this thing called Deep Live Cam, which was for like a real-time deep fake. So you could, as we are now in a video call, wear someone else's face, classic deep fake. Ethical considerations aside, I started looking at both of these applications, and I was looking at them on my MacBook. And because we're in the age of AI and coding agents, when I tried to run these on my MacBook, they were very slow or just did not work for various issues. And so I first decided I would like make them a bit better on Mac so they would run. And then I got a bit carried away and started, optimizing them to run well, not just run. And so I have some good kind of top line numbers in terms of like, getting these applications to go from like not running. And there were like several open issues for like Deep Live Cam that it just doesn't work on Mac, or that it runs at like 1 frame per second, right? And people had tried to tackle this and had failed. But, I got it to run at 30 frames per second on my M3 Max, and I got it up to 60 FPS on my desktop. Which, again, both of these is like limited by the camera at this point. But what was more interesting to me was, as I kind of dug into some of this, was just seeing that like some of the optimizations were in the Deep Live Cam software itself, but others were a function of what's called this ONNX runtime, ONNX. I won't bore our listeners with too many details here, but basically this ONNX runtime is a kind of like multi-platform machine learning intermediate representation, shall we say, where a developer can output their computation graph, their ONNX graph from TensorFlow or PyTorch or probably JAX or whatever else you want. And then that graph can be executed on any device that has this ONNX runtime. And ONNX runtime is responsible for mapping that generic graph to whatever your hardware uses. So in this particular case, what was a problem for both of these applications, both Mimic Motion and Deep Live Cam, was that Mac support in ONNX runtime is not great. And when I say Mac, I actually don't just mean Mac, I also mean iOS. So Apple hardware, the M series of chips, the support is not great in ONNX runtime. So when you were trying to use these computer vision models, in the best case, this whole model would be what's called one continuous graph, right? Like the data comes in and the whole thing just stays on the GPU and you just and you get the output. But because the Apple support is kind of limited, a lot of these operations within the graph were not supported on the Apple GPU, and so they would fall back to the CPU. And then this would require the computer to shuttle the information over, shuttle it back, shuttle it over, shuttle it back. And that takes time, and the CPU is potentially slower for even executing these operations. And what this kind of meant is, instead of having one graph, you may have 25 little graphs of, and then 25 little graphs takes longer to execute than one big graph. So, and I mean, again, even if you don't care about Mimic Motion or Deep Live Cam, what's interesting here is this is like an ONNX runtime intermediate layer issue, right? So these issues affect all sorts of different deep learning models that run an ONNX runtime on Apple hardware. And so by fixing these operations that are missing for these applications, they also fix the missing operations for other applications. And so effectively, I've got like 5 PRs submitted to Microsoft in the last 2 weeks or so, adding some of these missing operations. And some of them are quite transformative. Like, so the best one here, the biggest optimization is I added this like fused convolution kernel support. And this actually leads to an 8x speed up on ResNet 50. So ResNet 50 goes from being like 24 milliseconds for an inference to 3. So it's 8 times faster. But I also got like a 4x speed up on DW Pose, which is the model that underlies mimic motion, or one of the models that underlie mimic motion, and similar kind of speed ups for other models that underlie Deep Live Cam. So some of the super resolution GAN models, the kind of face detector in painting models, all of these things. And what's nice again is that like all of these improvements are not limited to these small repos. They are in the kind of Apple, Microsoft interface, like machine learning intermediate representation layer. So when this ships in the 1.26 in the next few weeks or whatever else, everybody who uses this software on Apple will suddenly see that these various applications just run better, which is pretty fun, pretty cool. And like, I'm still doing more of them because I don't know, they're kind of moreish. But you know, it's funny. Like you could basically like run these. You can get these models from the Onx Zoo. You can download these models and you can run them on Apple hardware. You can get it to tell you like how many graph components were handled. You know, you can see that, okay, there's more than one. That's bad. And then you see what operations are missing, and you know, Claude Code will tell you, and you can take a stab at implementing them. But you know, especially for these like latency sensitive applications, so like the Deep Live Cam, effectively what the computer has to do is it sees you moving. It has to detect where your face is, detect where your mouth is, apply the new face mask, use a super resolution model potentially to up resolution it. And now, of course, all of this has to happen per frame, or at least every few frames. So if you can make these faster, you can do it more times per second. And not just about faster, if you can reduce the variance, if you can make it more consistent, that also helps, because the tail latency is a big problem here. But yeah, it's a kind of fascinatingly just, I don't know, it feels like a very interesting kind of use of one's like side cycles, you know, to be just making things work better on Mac.
I mean, I think the important thing that you mentioned here, which is super cool, is that you just follow your curiosity and just want to learn something that was kind of niche, right? You want to have Nicolas Cage be on your face. Or you be Nicolas Cage. And that in effect just led to you fixing some issues or improving the system in a very general way, right? So I think many people might be just worrying, oh, what should I work on to maximize my odds of having impact? It's like, I mean, you can have impact by just randomly following your curiosity. And then once you notice that, oh, this could have an impact on multiple people, then you can double down on that, right? It's not like you should not optimize for your desire of having impact, but that's a very ambitious goal. Thus, it's hard to optimize for if you follow the advice of Why Greatness Cannot Be Planned. Great book. Just follow your curiosity, right? And work on something for you to learn. And then you might find this opportunity of like improving a system and having impact, right?
Yeah, I mean, like for me, it was like, you know, I tried out this Deep Live Cam. I mean, it's very popular on GitHub. It's got like almost 100,000 stars when I last checked. And, you know, first I was running it on my Mac and it just ran really badly. Like, let's say less than 1 frame a second, or about 1.5 maybe at the best of times. And I was like, that's weird. But I assumed it was a Mac problem, right? So I went to my desktop, which is like a fairly powerful, middle of last year desktop, where I have 5090 and 64 gigs of RAM. But even there, it ran at like 20 frames per second, you know? And I was like, this is not cool, man. I want 60, you know, locked 60. And so I basically, you know, I got it there, shipped it, you know, now runs, you know, 30 on a MacBook and 60 on a powerful desktop. And not only that, you're also, you know, improving all Apple Onx runtime applications. Yeah, I find it, I don't know, very exciting and empowering. It's funny, I actually gave a talk recently for another group, and I was talking about some of my excitement about vibe coding and, you know, some of the successes I'd had. And they were a bit, I wouldn't say skeptical, but they were a bit like curious, like, how do you do it? Like, how do you have such good results? We've been trying vibe coding for a while. And one thing I always tell people is, when were you trying it, and like what model were you using, right? Because first of all, if you were trying it like early last year, then it's a different kettle of fish to where it is today, right? But then it does also come down a bit to how you prompt it, like what you prompted to do, right? Like, you know, you couldn't have these kind of speed ups by just asking, please make this application fast. Like the model wouldn't, like people had tried that. There were lots of open issues on these repos, right? So you have to have a little bit of like knowledge or know-how or insight, right? To kind of tell Claude kind of where to look or what to, maybe have a little bit of like finesse as to like what were the kind of bottlenecks or whatever else. But once you kind of know that, it was fairly easy to say, okay, like if we squash the bottlenecks, performance goes up, you know? And I mean, again, once you know that this bottleneck exists in both Mimic Motion and Deep Live Cam, it was obvious that this is not just a problem that those two happen to have, right? This is a problem that Onk's runtime on Mac has. And then you can just help to close that gap, right? And benefit the billions of Mac, like Apple hardware users building real-time computer vision-y applications.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the good thing is that you also just enjoy the craft of doing AI work in AI with AI, right? So just having fun cranking at it like on the weekends, right? That's cool. That's really cool.
I mean, I definitely do. I definitely just do things for fun, just for curiosity, just for the love of the game. You know, it's not for money. It's just because I can. You know. Yeah. One thing though that I think has come to my attention, dealing with some of these different repos and different owners, is that it is difficult for open source repo owners to differentiate between people who kind of know what they're doing and don't know what they're doing with AI, right? Like, as I said earlier, like you can ask like any LLM to try and optimize any code base and they will come back with something. Now that something may be kind of nonsensical or useless or not work, or it could actually be legit and work well, but both of them are just going to be written up by the model and they're going to look identical from the kind of the maintainer's point of view. And so it's a kind of difficult question of how do you, as a maintainer, if you get two LLM generated kind of issues, how do you know which one is good and credible and which one is not? You know? Because obviously, like, you know, you can basically zero shot some improvements to code, or you could spend hours iterating and trying to get to the heart of it, you know? And it's just difficult for the owner to differentiate as to which, I mean, obviously maybe you have more commits on one versus the other, but I definitely think as society, we need to figure out what the mechanism is here, or like as a community. I mean, I do want everyone to have the ability to contribute to open source, but I also worry that maybe some people are getting overwhelmed in the pipeline, the kind of maintainers or whatever are getting too many low quality contributions or like contributions that get like orphaned because even though they make a commit or they make a PR, the person who made it doesn't ever come back to merge it or to respond to the comments or whatever else.
Don't know what to say here.
I mean, you don't need to say anything. It's just a thought. You know, the thing is, I mean, it's funny, right? You can like run these like models against a repo and they do find issues like instantly. But then you're kind of like trying to decide, is this a real issue? Is this worth fixing? You know, I mean, I would lean towards yes, but some of the people I've dealt with are very like AI skeptical or LLM skeptical, you know. And even if the LM kind of verifies it or builds a test that shows the failure mode, they're like, did you build it by hand? I'm like, oh, no, I vibe coded it.
But it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm not like the others. I'm different.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, right? Because And again, I'm not advocating for this because this would be in the antithetical to the idea of open source. Like what's nice about open source is the idea that it's like, you know, the contribution should be verified on its own, right? Like, is this a good contribution or not? Like it shouldn't be like, who are you? And hence should we like listen to you, you know? But obviously like if you're coming from like an anonymous GitHub account that has 0 contributions ever, you know, it's just created, you know, maybe it's like inherently less trustworthy than one that's like a decade old and has like thousands of commits. Controversial thought, you know, is linked to a legitimate like LinkedIn profile and you know, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, even code review, and this is something that we see in XF, for example, code review has changed, right? Like especially if you, so some systems like Claude Code, right? You have to like prompt it to do stuff, whereas other systems like these agentic web things, they kind of manage pull requests for you. So like if someone leaves a comment on a pull request for these kind of agentic managed systems, the system will automatically action it and respond to it. So like if I send code to Boris and Boris leaves a comment like remove this bloated comment, the LLM will automatically remove the bloated comment and respond to Boris saying, oh, good point, thank you, I removed it, you know. But then it's funny because like, again, then it's a very different code review system, right? Because basically the thing is going to immediately apply whatever you ask for. But that kind of punts it to the other person, right? Like it's like I vibe coded this and I give it to you and then you have to clean it.
I mean, but that's also like a kind of a workflow, right? I mean,
yeah,
having the guy that's just pushing forward and just pumping out reasonably vibe coded code to just get it working, you know. Okay, I show it's working. I did my test cases. It's faster, the loss is better, the accuracy is higher, or whatever it is what you're looking at. And then you have the quality control police that actually is more of the infra team, maybe, that is responsible for making it maintainable and scalable. So yeah, maybe that's just. I mean, honestly, that's how it's been, as far as I can tell, at the big labs where you had like the research scientists maybe and the research engineers and like the software engineers, right? Where the research scientists were the guys that read the papers, that know the math, that can come up with like reasonable ideas, that then worked like in some Jupyter notebook and showed, hey, I got it, it works. Now you go actually implement it properly into the big system. Now it's like, okay, I have my idea, I'm trying it out. I can vibe code into an actual branch, into the actual code, and have like documentation and test cases and whatnot that are also vibe coded. And then you hand it off to your engineering team to make it like actually robust and like clean and like nicely formatted or structured and abstracted or whatever, right? Maintainable. So I do see parallels here.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, I don't have a kind of strong judgment on it. I think it's just like interesting to kind of like, in a sense, like my feeling with code review was often like I do what the reviewer says. Like it's a bit LLM-ish, you know what I mean? In the sense that like I just want to get the code in, I just want to solve the problem, and they just happen to own it. And then they're like, oh, don't use a for loop, please use a while loop. And I'm just like, fine, you know, whatever you say, boss, you know what I mean? And I just do it. Yeah. Of course, the LLM's more compliant, but then again, they're basically just, I mean, they're still writing the same thing, but now the LLM just automatically actions it. And another area where this can be kind of challenging or a trap is like, and of course it like links to this sort of sycophancy or whatever. Like oftentimes when you tell an LLM to do something, it can often, I don't know, especially when it's like at the boundary of research, it'll do something that is just not factually accurate, like it's not true, you know what I mean? And you're like, did it really do this? Like, did it like, oh, I've optimized this and it's this, and you're like, that doesn't make any sense. That this cannot be faster than that, you know? And you're just like, ah.
But that's how it is at the forefront of AI, trying to push the boundaries and learn how to use the tools that we have access to.
Absolutely. And getting ready for Mythos.
Mythos when? In the next NPM package drop.
by accident.
By accident gonna release the mythos weights. But yeah, I think in this episode we talked a lot about what we've been up to, both of us again, from coming now from the startup world, traveling around, you know, San Francisco being the mecca of tech, and then talking about conferences and what they are like, what the benefits are, what the negatives might be. Open source contributions actually went a bit more technical, right, with my paper and again your Onyx optimizations. So way too much stuff going on, and those were the things that are happening outside of the company that can't be shared, right? So it's really exciting times. It's really cool, and yeah, this was fun. I hope we could share some insights and other people could enjoy them. Well then, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.